The record player was already spinning when we unlocked the front door. That was the first thing that didn't fit. The house had been empty for 6 years, the electricity still on only because my grandmother had prepaid her bill a decade in advance, something she'd done for every home she'd ever owned. A habit that now felt less like thrift and more like foreknowledge. Maya stopped in the doorway, her duffel bag sliding off her shoulder. "Did you leave a radio on?" I hadn't. We'd driven 8 hours from the city. The keys had been in the realtor's lockbox, and no one had been inside since the last tenant walked out mid-lease, leaving behind furniture and a note that said simply, "I can't stay here anymore." The record player sat on a mahogany stand in the living room, its arm resting on a vinyl record that was still turning, slow and steady, as if it had been playing all along. The song was unfamiliar, a slow piano melody, something that felt like it should have been a lullaby but wasn't. Notes that resolved into chords that didn't quite feel resolved, leaving a small, unsettled space at the end of each phrase. I lifted the arm. The record stopped. I checked the label, handwritten in my grandmother's unmistakable script. Day 1. And beneath that, a date. Today's date. I turned the record over. The other side was blank, but someone had written in pencil, very small, at the bottom edge, "Don't open the door to the basement." "You will, though. That's the problem." I looked at Maya. She looked at the record. Neither of us said what we were both thinking, that my grandmother had died 8 years ago, and this record had been in this house, in this player, waiting for us to arrive on exactly this day. We unpacked anyway. We drank wine, we talked about the city. We made a plan to clear out the house and sell it by the end of the month. I put the record back in its sleeve and slid it into a stack of others I found in the cabinet. Each one labeled with a date, each one further in the future, each one written in my grandmother's hand. I didn't tell Maya about the pencil message, not then. I told myself it was just a coincidence, a prank from an old tenant, a joke that had outlived its joker. But the record player kept turning itself on every night at exactly 2:47 a.m., playing that same unresolved piano melody, and each time I woke to it, the record in the tray was a different one, labeled with a date that was closer to tomorrow. The attic door was locked when we first tried it. The key was in a kitchen drawer, labeled attic in my grandmother's handwriting, but when I inserted it, the lock turned with a sound like a tongue clicking, and the door swung open on its own, as if it had been waiting. The attic was small, dusty, filled with boxes of old clothes and Christmas decorations, but at the far end, propped against the sloped ceiling, was a full-length mirror in a brass frame, its surface clouded with age, the reflection dim and slightly yellowed. I stood in front of it. My reflection looked back. Same face, same tired eyes. But the room behind me was wrong. The boxes were arranged differently, the window was on the opposite wall, and there was a door where there should have been only wallboard. I turned around. The attic was exactly as we'd found it. I looked back at the mirror. The reflection showed the other room, and in it, standing behind my own shoulder, was a figure. A woman. Her face turned away, her hand raised as if reaching for something. I called Maya. She came up, looked in the mirror, and saw only herself. She said, "It's just an old mirror, Leo. The silvering's bad." But when she turned away, the reflection in the mirror didn't turn with her. It stayed facing forward, watching me. I didn't tell her that either. I covered the mirror with a blanket, and we went downstairs to eat. That night, I woke at 2:47 to the record player, a new record labeled Day 4. And when I went to the attic, the blanket was on the floor, the mirror was uncovered, and the reflection showed me standing in the basement holding a key, and behind me, the woman was now facing me, and she had my grandmother's face. I didn't sleep. I sat in the living room, staring at the record player, trying to reason it away. But the records were piling up, each one a date, each one a message that seemed to know what we'd done that day. The one labeled Day 6 had a note in pencil. "You'll find the key in the kitchen drawer. You'll know which one." I checked the drawer. There was a key I hadn't seen before, old brass, tarnished, with a tag that read basement door. I hadn't told Maya about the mirror. I hadn't told her about the records, but that morning she came to me and said, "I had a dream. Your grandmother was standing in the basement, and she was holding a photograph of us, dead." I stared at her. She said, "I don't know why I'm telling you this. It felt real." I pulled out the stack of records. I showed her the dates, the messages. I showed her the mirror. She went pale. "We need to leave." We tried. The front door wouldn't open. The lock turned, but the door itself felt bolted from the outside, as if something had sealed it. The back door, the windows, all locked, all solid, all refusing. And the record player in the living room started playing again. We had no choice. The house had decided we were staying until we opened that basement door, and the key in the kitchen drawer felt less like a choice and more like a summons. I took the key. Maya followed me. The basement door was at the end of the hallway, beneath a narrow staircase that led nowhere. A door we'd both assumed was a closet, but the key fit. And when I turned it, the door opened onto a flight of stairs, descending into a darkness that smelled like damp concrete, and something else, something like burnt sugar. At the bottom, a single room. Empty except for a table with a record player, a stack of records, and a mirror identical to the one in the attic. But this one showed us standing in this very room, holding hands, and our reflections were older, gray-haired, tired, as if years had passed in the space between the mirror and our actual bodies. I picked up the top record. It was labeled Day 10, and the date was next week. I played it. My grandmother's voice came through, thin and distant. "You're listening to this because you opened the door. I know you did. I did too. The house doesn't let you leave until you understand. You're the one who left the records. You're the one who made the mirror. You're the one who will come back and do it again." I looked at Maya. She was staring into the mirror. In the reflection, she was reaching for something, a photograph lying on the table. She looked down. There was no photograph on the table, but in the mirror she was holding it, and the photograph showed her and me lying on the floor of this room. Our eyes open but empty, our faces slack. She dropped her hands. The reflection didn't. I grabbed her arm. "We need to figure out how to stop this. We need to break the mirror." I swung my fist. The glass didn't break. It swallowed my hand, and I felt cold fingers wrap around my wrist from the other side. I pulled back. My hand was empty. But in the mirror, a version of me was now standing behind us, holding my hand, and he was smiling. He said, "You're not breaking anything. You're finishing what started 30 years ago." And then he pointed at the stack of records. At the bottom, a record labeled Day 0, the one we'd found first. He said, "You have to record the message. You have to tell your past selves to leave, but you already know they won't." I looked at the record player. It had a microphone, old and dusty. I knew what I had to do. I sat down, pressed record, and spoke to my past self. The version of me that had been walking up to this house 3 days ago. The one who hadn't yet heard the record player. I said, "Don't open the basement door. Don't go into the attic. Leave now and don't come back." I played it back. My voice, but distorted, stretched, as if it had been recorded years ago. And then I realized this was the record that had been playing when we first arrived. The Day 1 record. I had just recorded the message that had started it all. Maya understood. She said, "You're the one who made the loop. You just created it." I looked at the mirror. The reflection of me was now standing beside the reflection of my grandmother, and she was nodding, and she said, "That's the cost. You knew it would happen. You just didn't remember." We stayed in the basement for what felt like hours, but the clock on the wall, an old analog clock that hadn't worked in years, was ticking, and its hands were moving backward. We tried to leave. We went up the stairs, and the door at the top was open. We stepped into the hallway, and the house was quiet. No record player, no mirror, no messages. The front door opened normally. We stepped outside into the daylight, and for a moment, I thought we had escaped. But then I looked back. The house was exactly as we'd found it, but the windows were dark, and in the attic window, I saw a figure, myself, standing behind the mirror, watching me leave. I blinked. The figure was gone. We drove away. We checked into a motel. We called the realtor. We said we weren't coming back. But that night, Maya woke me at 2:47. She said, "I heard the record player again. It was playing in my head. I didn't hear anything, but I saw it. In the reflection of the motel television, the record player was spinning and a record was turning and the label read, Day 1. I knew then, the loop wasn't broken. We had just become the next version of the people who had to open the door. We had recorded the message. We had created the records. We had become the grandparents. I checked my wallet. In the back, tucked behind my driver's license, was a small card with handwriting that I recognized, my grandmother's. It said, "You already know how it ends. You just haven't lived it yet." I showed Maya. She said, "That's your handwriting, Leo." I looked at it. It was, but I hadn't written it, not yet. We're driving now. We don't know where, but the record player is following us. I hear it in the car's static, in the hum of the engine, in the rhythm of the windshield wipers. Every time I close my eyes, I see the basement and the mirror and my own reflection waiting for me to return. I know I will. I have to because I already have. The record is spinning. I'm just not sure which version of me is listening anymore.